Blue Beetle is the newest DC superhero film. This movie went through an interesting production because when they filmed this movie, it was planned to go straight to HBO Max, and then once they were done with principal photography, the new runner of Warner Brothers Discovery decided, nope, this is getting a theatrical window. And so I was very curious to see how it would perform in theaters, how would it do at box office, how would the audience scores be, how would the critic scores be, because usually when you see a streaming movie, you go in with streaming expectations, but this movie was built on streaming expectations, but it's going to have theatrical expectations. So I think this movie had a lot on its shoulders, and so I was very curious to see how it would live up. Clearly, this won't do well at the box office, considering that cards that it was dealt. I thought it was a bad idea to put this to theaters, considering that it was a streaming movie. Because a character like Blue Beetle, no offense to the character, I don't think would sell tickets, considering that it's an origin story IP that people aren't very familiar of, besides the DC brand, but people have been so disengaged with DC as well. Look at The Flash. Look at Shazam 2. You know, this whole James Gunn reboot that's happening just made people completely lose interest. And so I'm very loose on, like, how is this going to fit within the new DC universe? Does this have any effect? I don't even entirely know. And in fact, I'll say this. I love James Gunn to death. I love his movies so much, and I just trust him so much. But I really feel like he needs to say at some point whether this new DC universe is a clean slate or if we're going to keep some other things. Because I think if we keep other things, that's really not a good idea, because I feel like we'll continue to see bad box office because the general audience will be confused. So I really feel like we need a clean slate and just sadly clean house. This loose idea of like who's going to be let into the new DCU, it's getting on my nerves, and I just really feel like we just need a clean reset considering the disasters of the last couple movies. But anyway, how was this movie? You know, this movie, like I said, it had a lot on its shoulders, and overall I was surprised for the most part with this movie. I won't say that I was blown away, nor did it impress me, but I honestly think, considering the fact that this is made to be a streaming movie, I probably had the best possible experience I probably could have had while watching this. But I feel like also seeing it in the theater may have degraded a couple of scenes, considering that, like I said, made for streaming. Mostly to do with some of the technical choices with the movie that you can tell that it was just made for a streaming movie. The CGI, though, actually did impress me at a couple moments, and that probably was boosted because it got the theatrical release, and they probably give it a higher budget for its VFX. The VFX here was fine. There was some scenes at the end that, you know, look like the modern 2023 CGI that we've been getting, and there's some scenes that actually look pretty decent. The action sequences, I was also very curious to see what they would do with as well, because based off the trailer, there was like some martial arts moves, and I was curious to see how they would do that. And they did a pretty decent job with the action. There's one really good sequence in the third act, and then there's one really bad sequence at the third act, and one has a lot of CGI, and one felt real, at least. I don't know how much CGI was in it, but the good thing is I really couldn't tell. Yeah, what holds this movie together is the family and the characters that we follow. And what doesn't hold this movie together, in fact, what holds this movie back quite a bit, is how much it borrows and steals from other comic book movies. I know that Blue Beetle was one of the first DC characters ever written, and I don't know how accurate this is to the source material, but if this is very accurate, like, props to them, but they really should have went a different direction with this origin story, because it just feels so familiar in its structure and a bunch of story beats that just feel exactly the same, particularly within the first Iron Man movie, and even I saw a lot of comparisons to Venom. And I know Venom is also a ripoff of many movies that we've seen before, but particularly the first act of Venom, where we have a main character, he's down on his luck, and then he runs into a scientist who can get some valuable technology, even though he might not exactly want that, but he's stuck with it. Then he's stuck with superpowers that he doesn't necessarily want, but learns to live with in the end. It's just something that we've seen before. The last act of this movie, like I said, the last act of this movie had good action and also had bad action, but whenever that bad action was happening, I just felt like I was just checking my watch to see how much of the movie was left. The movie is 2 hours and 7 minutes, and I honestly feel like it slightly overstayed its welcome. I don't know exactly what would be cut. It just kind of wore on me a little bit within that third act, because it's nighttime, it's a bunch of CGI, it's throwing people around. We've seen it before. Like a lot of people said, I saw another review, if this movie came out in 2004, it'd be perfect, but it's not 2004 anymore. And that's where I just felt like this movie needed to go back to its script and fix these core issues with its screenplay. But on the bright side, what holds this movie together is this family. They're all very likable, they're all very warm, and they're all very loving. And the cast does a great job portraying that as well. In fact, I was very surprised by how many moments with our characters gave me chills and kept me invested throughout. Because if it weren't for those moments, I would probably not like this movie at all. These characters are so likable, they're so much fun to watch, and their character moments are, even though they're familiar beats, they hit so hard. And it's all due to the cast because all of them give great performances, and that's all to do with the family. What's not good about the cast is the villain in this movie. The villain in this movie is every single villain we've ever seen before. The villains in this movie is in contention for some of the worst comic book movie villains I've ever seen. It really just felt like something that we've seen before, and they try to like connect all the characters with a theme at the end. It just didn't work for me because the villains were still really bland. This movie has a lot of comedy in it. Not all of it worked. Some of it did. Some of it didn't. There was a lot of crickets in the theaters for some jokes that actually did make me laugh, and then laughter during jokes I didn't think were funny at all. But comedy is a very subjective thing. There was a lot of moments within the comedy where I can just count down the seconds to a joke, particularly one moment before the third act where it involves a joke that George Lopez makes, and it's after our lead does something, and then I was like, we're gonna have a joke right after this. Like the character is doing this thing, and I'm like, we're gonna have a joke as soon as he's done doing this. And then there's a pause, and then he says it, and I was like, yep. It felt like the movie kind of wrote itself. I don't want to say is AI generated because I know AI is a big controversy right now. And when I say something like this is AI written, like obviously it wasn't. It was written by actual people. But like, come on, we can do a better job than insert joke here things because we've seen these moments 1,000 times, and I just feel like it needed a little bit more originality within its screenplay. But on the bright side, there's good action, there's good heart, there's good humor, and there's a good cast, and that's what really just stitched this entire movie together and did not make it unbearable from beginning to end. And in fact, it made it entertaining for most of the runtime. And I'm going to give Blue Beetle a 6.8 out of 10. Like I said, cast held this one up so much for me, and I don't even want to know what my review would look like if it weren't for them. Comment down below what you guys thought of Blue Beetle. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Did you think it was the reinvention that DC needed, or did you guys think that this was just another useless film that should have probably been scrapped? So yeah, anyways, comment down below what you guys thought. Like, share, subscribe, and stuff like that, and adios.